We're really, really excited to welcome Pam Jenoff back to be with us at the Women of Washington Hebrew. It's always a treat. And she keeps writing books, so we'll keep reading her books and sharing some time together. So as we get started, I wanted to remind people, and I'll put it back in the post again, in the chat again. This program is a program that we are able to do thanks to our partnership with the Jewish Book Council, and we encourage you to purchase Pam's book, whether through our Mitzvah Mall, whether through Inkwood, which is a bookstore in Haddonfield, New Jersey, and maybe I can put that in the chat in a little while, where you could also get your book signed, personalized by Pam, and to support her writing, her books, and I know for many of us the actual feel of a book in our hand is such a wonderful feeling, and certainly even as we are on Zoom this evening, that sense of connection is always so wonderful. So we're thrilled to welcome Pam back to the Women of Washington Hebrew Congregation Literary Club, and I'm so thankful as always to my partners in this, Bonnie Youngentab and Mara Brick, who every year attend the Jewish Book Council with me. And then we spend lots of time hearing from hundreds and hundreds of authors who are all really fabulous. And then thinking about who will be, who you'll all enjoy hearing as much as we enjoy. And we only get 2 minutes to hear them at the Jewish Book Council, but truly always a treat to hear Pam, and then certainly to bring her to be with us. Pam Jenoff is the New York Times bestselling author of The Woman with the Blue Star, The Lost Girls of Paris, The Orphan's Tale, The Commandant's Girl, The Diplomat's Wife, The Ambassador's Daughter, The Last Summer at Chelsea Beach, The Winter Guest, The Things We Cherished, Almost Home, and A Hidden Affair. She also authored a short story in the anthology Grand Central, Original Post-War Stories of Love and Reunion. And tonight she's here to talk about Codename Saphire, which is book number 12. I don't think I hope I got all of them.
You did great.
I told Pam I'm on a quest. I've read a number of her books, but I still have a number to go. And it's always a treat to have another Pam Jenoff book to turn to. Pam was born in Maryland and raised outside Philadelphia. She attended George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and Cambridge University in England. Upon receiving her master's in history from Cambridge, she accepted an appointment as special assistant to the Secretary of the Army. Following her works at the Pentagon, Pam moved to the State Department. In 1996, she was assigned to the U.S. Consulate in Krakow, Poland. It was during this period that Pam developed her expertise in Polish-Jewish relations and the Holocaust. Working on matters such as preservation of Auschwitz and the restitution of Jewish property in Poland, Pam developed close relations with the surviving Jewish community. Pam left the Foreign Service in 1998 to attend law school and graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. She worked for several years as a labor and employment attorney, both at a firm and in-house in Philadelphia, and now teaches law school at Rutgers. She lives outside Philadelphia with her husband, 3 children, dog, cat, lizard, and bird. Did I get all the animals?
I need to update my bio because we're up to 6. There was a bat mitzvah kitten, and there is, who did we miss on there? There was the rabbit, the bird, the lizard.
Oh, the rabbit. We didn't have the rabbit.
Yes.
Rabbit and kitten.
Right. So we're up to 6.
Love it. Love it. So again, as always, it's wonderful to be with you, Pam, and to learn more about this. Each of your stories picks up on some different elements, and certainly a connection with World War II and history. And I'm curious, as we get started, what was the inspiration behind this novel?
So first of all, thank you for the warm introduction. Thank you for having me back. I was with you in person, wasn't I, before the pandemic at some point? Like, I feel like a long time ago, I have vague recollections of driving through Potomac. So
I believe it was a long time ago. And then we also did one on, this might be the 3rd time. You might
I think so.
And I think we did one in person and then one on Zoom.
Excellent. Sorry I could not be down there in person. I'm not quite traveling at the moment, so thank you for indulging me virtually. So Codename Sapphire, as you heard from Rabbi, is my 12th book. It came out more than a year ago, so about 14 months ago, February. And so in order to explain Codename Sapphire and tell you a little bit about the book, I of course want to tell you where the idea came from. But in order to tell you where I got this idea, I should sort of tell you where I find book ideas in general. And that is to say, I actually go looking for them. Am I allowed to have mine on gallery view so I can see you all? Is that okay?
Yes,
Does that,
yes,
does
of
that mess
course.
you up
Yeah.
if I do that?
No, not
I
at
just like
all.
to I like to see
I like to do that as well.
instead of seeing myself. That's very disconcerting. So anyhow, I actually, when I'm looking for a book idea, I go looking for them. How many of you, at least if you have your cameras on, how many of you have I spoken with before? Not okay, so I hope your memories are terrible and you won't remember any of my jokes from last time, but I don't want to repeat myself too much. But if we've spoken before, you may know that I have this background that's really steeped in Holocaust work from the years that I spent as a diplomat in Poland, and I'm happy to talk about that more. But what I need to tell you for purposes of this question is that although I lived among the survivors and I regard my books as love stories to the people who lived through that difficult, most horrific of times, I don't write their stories. They are not mine to tell. I write fiction. And so when I am looking for a book idea, I go looking in history for it. I look for that nugget of inspiration. And what I am looking for is what I call the gasp and the questions. So the gasp is that I'm looking for a piece of history that is so fresh and untold that even though I've been working with the war for more than a quarter century now, it makes me gasp. Because if I can find that original story, I'm hopeful that I'm onto something about which you will feel the same way. And so in the case of Codename Sapphire, the gasp was learning about a train that was headed from Belgium to Auschwitz with Jewish prisoners inside, and about a group of young people who endeavored to stop that train in its tracks and free the people inside. And when I heard this, I gasped because I had never heard of such a thing. And so then came the questions, and I wanted to know who were these people who had been so brave, and at the same time, why had more people not tried to do the same? And so that's where Codename Sapphire began.
Thank you. Um, how did you research this book? And I guess both geographically, was it based on um, experiences and places you had already been? Just maybe share a little bit about the research and also the writing process as well.
Thank you. So, I can't remember. I feel like we might have talked about this with Sapphire, right? Or with the one with the blue star when I was here. It's super ideal if you can like hop on a plane and go somewhere. And for many years, my wings were clipped. And I was going to get on that plane for the woman with the blue star. And then COVID happened, the flight shut down. And I had an emergency appendectomy. So I didn't get to go back to Poland. And when I started writing Codename Sapphire, post-pandemic travel was still very, very difficult. And so I have actually not spent as much time in Belgium as some of the other places I've written about, like Poland and places like that. But fortunately, over these many years, I've gotten really good at researching from a distance. And so when you're researching, there's a wide range of materials you can use. There are photographs, memoirs, correspondence, maps, periodicals. And if you're really lucky, someone has written a good nonfiction book on your subject. And so in the case of Codename Sapphire, there's actually a wonderful nonfiction book called The 20th Train, and it's about the real life train that they rescued the people from. And it had so much of the historical detail that I needed to write this book. Now, I could go on really, really long about research, but let's save that for the questions at the end, because you talk about how do you weave research in with your story so it doesn't stop the plot? Or better yet, how do you not make mistakes in the research? Like, these are many things we can talk about, but I'll pause there because I have very long answers.
Well, we love them because it gives us great insight into what makes your and this book in particular, but each of your books and stories so magical and resonant. So
You asked me about writing. What did you, I
Oh,
didn't answer
yes.
you, but
So,
what did you want me to
what was
ask me
your
more?
writing process? And how do you balance that? And I know we talked about this last time, and it's after a little bit of time since the last book, and your kids are also a little bit older than the last time, but how do you balance writing? When do you write? You're also teaching, you're also how this is a question I get often as well, and I'm always looking to learn from others how to balance all the many pieces. I think all of us, everyone on here, does a lot of different things in the world, and we all do a lot of different things in the world. And I'm curious about your writing process. When you write, do you have uh, certain structure to that, etc.?
So my writing process goes back way before I had kids because when I got serious about writing, I had just graduated from law school in September of 2001. And 1 week later, 9/11 happened. And there was this moment in my life where I was like, wow, I've always wanted to be a writer and I really need to get started. It's kind of a mortality moment that I had. And I started writing. But at that moment, I was also a new attorney at a big city law firm with a lot of student loan debt. And so I couldn't quit my job, nor did I want to. I had to write the books alongside the job. So I always wrote from 5 to 7 in the morning. And then I went to the firm. And that was my kind of start. And so it still influences how I work today. I would always prefer early morning. I'm not a long day writer. Like if you gave me 8 hours, I don't know what to do with 8 hours. I don't have that kind of stamina, but I will work 7 days a week in those, in those morning chunks. And so I don't always get those times right now because I have 3 young teens. They still need to be driven, plus the 6 pets, plus I teach at Rutgers. Today was my last day of the semester. And so very much varies on the day, but I do believe in writing every single day, early morning when I can get it. And that's kind of like the discipline for me. I'm very slow these days, and so I need to be very consistent in my writing. If you want to know about actual writing process, I'm not sure if anyone has ever said here or to your group that there's these 2 kinds of writers, plotters and pantsers. Has anyone ever told you that? So a plotter is a dear soul who makes an outline. They write sentence by sentence and they make every sentence look nice when they write. And you can tell by the way I describe that it's not me. I am a pantser and we write by the seat of our pants. That's why it's called that. And so that means I turn on a computer and I go, bleh, and all the words come out in a random order. And then it's terrible to make them nice. But that's how I do my writing. So the only caveat to that is, I might have told you this, but when I read The Woman with the Blue Star, I turned in that book and I turned in a total stinker of a first draft. And my editor was like, no. I said, no, but I had to rewrite 95% of that book and I never want to do that again. So I'm kind of a reformed pantser. I do a slight outline before we start, but that's kind of my process. I don't know what else. Ask me anything, but that's the sort of it.
That's also just that's very affirming to hear, because there are I would say probably 2 kinds of sermon writers. If you talk to rabbis, there are those who follow like the what we learned in homiletics and following that order, and then those of us who sort of we have this idea and just get it all out there and then put
Yeah,
it together. And I tend to be in the second camp.
you're a pantser.
Yeah, I'm a pantser, maybe slightly reformed, working on that.
Yes.
Um, I would love to have you share a little bit about the main characters in this book, Hannah, Lily, and Marceline, right? Or
Micheline, right. Yes.
Micheline. And are they based on real people? Are they based on real people historically and or real people when you come up with characters, especially if they're fictional, are they based on people you know? How do you create your characters? And tell us a little bit more about these 3 amazing women.
So I write fiction first and foremost. So I'm always, anytime someone says based on, I like cross it out and I say inspired by, because I think we as historical fiction authors can get in trouble if we stake too large a claim around what is real in our books. So my characters are fictitious. They are sometimes inspired by real people. So when I started writing Codename Saphire, I had this idea of Hannah and Lily. And so I'm not assuming everybody has read the book. Is that accurate when I speak? We should not assume everyone has finished the book. So we have Hannah, and she was this German political fugitive I created, and she had lost her pregnancy. She had lost her fiance in a horrible pogrom-like event at the, early days of World War II. And she fled Germany. She tried to go to North America, and her ship was turned away from the United States and Cuba. And if that sounds familiar, I was inspired by the St. Louis, but I don't call my ship the St. Louis because I had to change the date. So this is where I want to be respectful of real history. So Hannah came back to Europe. She was forced back to Europe, and she finds shelter with her cousin Lily. And in creating these two women, I really wanted this dichotomy. So Lily is very different because she is affluent. She's a Belgian citizen. Her husband's a doctor. She has a young son. And so Lily is trying to pretend like the war is not happening to her. But Hannah still needs to get out of Europe. And so Hannah connects with what is called the Saphire line. And Saphire is engaged in the very important work of getting downed Allied airmen out from behind enemy lines. And Saphire in my book was inspired by a real line called the Comet Network. And the Comet Network was run by a woman. Her name was Dee Dee. And so Micheline is sort of inspired by Dee Dee. And in my book, Micheline and Hannah strike up this deal. And Hannah says, I'll help with the work of Saphire if you help me get out of Europe for good. And so there's this kind of like three-way dynamic between these women, between Lily, Hannah, and Micheline, who are very, very different.
What character, if any, do you most relate to?
I don't know, because I normally say in my book, I always relate to the most disheveled character. Like if there's someone who's well put together, that's not me. But in all seriousness, each of these characters has something I relate to, because I relate to Lily as a mother. I relate to Hannah from sort of her independence, and I relate to Micheline. She has a very close relationship with her brother in the book. And so each of them have kind of a different meaning for me, I would say.
Have you met, or did you have you met or communicated with any of the real women from the Comet line?
So I have not, although the most amazing thing, as I was working on this book, I talked about it on a Zoom, just like this one. I forget where I was Zooming with geographically, and a woman contacted me, she and her sister, and they said our parents were on the 20th train. They were among the escapees.
Wow.
So that was really, really amazing.
Wow.
So
Were the parents
they
what,
were long deceased,
okay.
but they had survived. So I heard
Wow.
from the daughters, which was
Wow.
amazing.
Um, so you write about this you write these characters who have incredible courage to do what they do. And I imagine you've probably given some thought to this, but how do you think they, whether your characters and or the real life people involved, women involved, how did they have the courage to do what they did?
Well, one of the things I like most about writing women in history is you take these women who through normal history would have walked on a very set path, and then war or other catastrophe happens and they're thrown off that path and they're put in situations they never expected to be in. They are tested, they are challenged, and they sort of, I love to see how they respond and grow to those challenges. And the other piece of it is that one of the things I've really come to appreciate over the years from when I lived in Poland and I saw all the nuances of history is that, history is not made up of these great wars and battles we all learned about in school. It's actually just an infinite number of individual people making decisions. And so that's one of the things I really find as I've been doing this over quite a bit of time now. One of the themes that's evolved for me that really resonates with these characters is the question of individual choices, that they make.
When we talked a little bit about this when you think about the individual choices they made, what they were facing in their time, many people have drawn parallels to, sort of the pre-war period, the anti-Semitism, the rise in anti-Semitism that they experienced, the rise of anti-Semitism that we're experiencing. How do you sort of connect that? What obviously this is historical fiction, And as we, as we read it, I think it is even reflecting on the courage of these women. Many of us I know have had these conversations about what would we do? What will we do? How do we respond to the anti-Semitism we're experiencing in our time? And how do we think about standing up for others, both within the Jewish community and others who are recipients of hatred and bias and all the awful pieces of what we're seeing in this moment and in a time when our country is so polarized. How do we find that courage? And I guess any parallels you might draw or anything that you discovered that might give us a sense of hope.
So before I answer that, I kind of want to take a little roundabout way and say, the morning of October 7th, I was at a book event. It was not a Jewish book event, but I was in at the Morristown, New Jersey Festival of the Book. I was being driven up there as like everything was unfolding. And so afterward, I kind of had this moment where I'm like, can we really keep doing book events? Like, who are we to talk about this stuff while this is going on in the world? It was really a moment of pause. And obviously the answer I came to was, yes, we can, or I wouldn't be sitting here with you. But really, it gave me great comfort then and now to kind of join in like fellowship with other engaged readers, engaged women, engaged Jewish readers, etc., Jewish and non-Jewish, and share our love of literature. And then secondly, I realized that the things we had been talking about all along have never been more important. And so what I want to tell you is that so much of my love of this period comes out of the years I spent in Poland. And this was the mid 1990s, no cell phones, no internet. This is post-communist. And I was living like, I mean, don't worry, I think Poland is actually a remarkable place. You walk around and like the Yiddishkeit, you can just kind of feel it in the soil from the centuries and centuries of Jews living there. But it was also really hard to live there because you would hear in one of those old world sirens and suddenly you'd want to go hide in your basement. Like it was a very visceral throwback to the history. And it always made me wonder, what would I have done? Not even if I was Jewish, but just if I was an ordinary person on the street, what I would have done. And it always troubled me because I'm going to say this in a very pre-October 7th kind of way. I'm not a brave person. I think Dorothy would have been just fine staying in Oz instead of trekking back. And, I used to think that when I was a kid. And so the reason I say that is I'm like, well, would I have just hidden in my basement? Or would I have stood up for people? Maybe I would have hidden in my basement, especially now that I have children. So I'm saying this only to tell you that I've been thinking about this question for a really long time, only it's been brought to the forefront because years and years and years of doing these events, Jewish Book Council and elsewhere, there's usually someone who raises their hand and says, what about anti-Semitism in Poland? And this has always been a really good and complicated and important question. But this year it's like, what about anti-Semitism in the United States, right? The dialogue has shifted, not that one is more important than the other, but it's like right here on our doorsteps. And so I am not a political leader or anything. I am just a writer and a Jewish mom. But I'm going to say this, that in my books, what I love to do is I love to take characters who through normal circumstances never would have met, but because of the war, they cross paths and they have to help each other in order to survive. Because if in a book you can see people transcending their differences and coming together, I hope that readers will empathize and it will help to lessen some of the division that we're so feeling right now.
Thank you. That's really a beautiful way to think about it.
And such a long answer, I'm sorry.
No. Please don't apologize. They're not here to hear me. They get to hear me all the time. They're here to hear you. And really, a big part of why we love having these literary clubs and being able to have and speak with authors is because you provide these opportunities for us to step away from the world for a little bit, to imagine, and even in the ways in which there are echoes in history of what we're experiencing. It still is, very much historical fiction provides, at least for me, I find that it provides something that feels extremely relevant and also provides that little bit of escape. And especially in the ways in which you bring it all together and provide a sense of whether hope or find that those possibilities of how different stories can end up, and those every path possible. Um, I have another question or two, but I forgot to mention at the beginning, but I know, ladies, you all know this. If anyone would like to, if you have a question for Pam, you can send it directly to me in the chat, and or you can post it as well. But we love your books, and this comes from a number of us. We love your books and are always wondering what's next.
Thank you. So it's funny, this week I am deep in like a third round of revision. So here's what I can tell you. The next book is slated to be out next February, which sounds a little far away to you and it sounds terrifyingly soon to me. And so it is historical, and it has one storyline set during the war and one set after the war, and it has a mysterious object that connects the two. I don't even have a title that I can give you certain enough, but I can show you, look, pages, post-it notes, work, it's happening. My husband was like, I thought you turned that in already. I was like, I turned it in at Christmas when you took the kids away to get so I could get it done. It comes back. And then I turned it in again, in March, and it comes back. And each time it comes back, it's a little further along. So that is what I'm working on. I promised February. I also I don't know if anybody's an online reader, which I'm actually not, but I got to write a short story as part of an Amazon original collection. They took stories from about 8 of us and they put them in this online collection. And my short story, it's called The Forgotten Chapter, and it's actually set in Selfridges in London during World War II. So if you're looking for something, that's like an e-short story I just did for Amazon.
Great. It's great to hear. Wait, I can put that in the chat.
I think it's called The Forgotten Chapter. I am really tired, so I'm not entirely sure. But I think I got that right.
I can always follow up with you.
If you put my name in on Amazon, it'll pop up. But there's 8 stories. It's by Maggie Shipstead. It's by Marie Benedict. It was a whole collection by all of us. It was super. Ariel Lahan. It was super fun.
That's great.
Thank you.
Friends, I wanted to invite, if you have a question.
Don't be scared off by my long answers. Ask away.
And I know you've talked about your spending time in Poland. I'm riffing here in case someone needs to either type something in or getting the courage to ask. I know you lived in Krakow, and you talked a bit before about your feelings about being in Poland and what you felt, and what when you think about Poland today, and I know you haven't been recently, what is life like, I guess, as a diplomat in Poland, or as a diplomat, period? I don't know how many of us have that experience. So I think I always love hearing you share a little bit about what that life is like.
Well, so let me say, I have not been to Poland in 20 mumble years. I was supposed to go back when my flight got canceled, and I'm desperate.
I haven't been there since 1987, so
I'm so desperate to go back. I mean, that was so sad when my flight got canceled, and I really want to go. Frankly, there are people I want to see who are up there in years, and just a lot of love. So I had a really amazing experience when I went to Poland. I went with a Jewish star around my neck, and I was able to go to shul every Friday night and Saturday, in defiance of all of the history. The elderly community took me in like grandparents. And I will tell you that, I only saw my dad cry twice in his life. Once was when my mom was sick, and once was outside the Remu synagogue in Krakow when they called him in because they needed him for the minyan. And so it was this incredibly warm sense of every Jewish person mattered and belonged. And the amazing thing is, it's gotten so much stronger since I was there. There's now a JCC Krakow, which does wonderful things. There's been kind of this really special rebirth. So it's never going to be Brooklyn again, but it's sort of like this small and enduring community is how I feel about it. And so if you do get to go to Poland, I know when I get to go back to Poland, I would definitely go for Shabbat. Like, don't just go to the camps and leave. Definitely go. It's a very special experience there.
And Pam, we we had some trips, mostly Israel, but we had some other trips as well pre-COVID, and we've been talking about travel and re-engaging in some opportunities for travel. And I'm thinking that wouldn't it be great to do a trip to Poland with you,
Oh my goodness, it's so
and to be
fun.
able to sort of trace some of the stories that you've brought to us, and both the ones that we've shared and some of the others as well, and to be able to step back into that history. And the last time I was there was 1987, so it was still very much a um, communist overtones to it. Uh, and there has been in so many ways this rebirth of Jewish life in Poland. And you know, I may have shared this at one of our previous uh, programs with you. But when I was there in 1987, there was a caretaker at the synagogue who was telling us that he was basically waiting for the last Jew in Krakow. This is in Krakow, the last Jew to die, because then he would be able to make Aliyah and go to Israel. And he was significantly younger than others in the community. And there's been such a rebirth and rejuvenation of Jewish life in Poland and in other parts of Eastern Europe, where people have really returned in order to, you know, sort of, it's almost like making the desert bloom, but not the desert. It's bringing that history and that Jewish joy and that sense of Jewish presence in ways that are really demonstrate a commitment to you know, to those who came before, and honoring the memories of so many who, you know, are no longer, and whose families are no longer here either.
That was beautifully said.
Thank
Yes,
you.
agree.
So if we decide to do an Eastern European trip, friends, whether it's maybe a Women of Washington Hebrew and Busters, and then we invite Pam as our scholar in residence to be, you know, connect us with good, wonderful guides, etc. There could be lots of possibilities there. Let's file that away.
Sounds good.
Um, Jeannie's clapping. I would love to. Does anyone here have questions? I know you're usually not a shy group, but I didn't really remind you at the beginning to share. So feel free, if you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself, and feel free to ask away. Looks like June might be. June, are you trying to unmute?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay. I was curious about Micheline and her brother and the role they played in the resistance.
So they're fictitious characters. Like I said, Micheline was inspired by this woman, Audrey. They called, I think it was Audrey. They called her Dee Dee, who was the leader of Comet Network. And so she was inspired by her, but very loosely. But you know what I want to tell you is that the reason I got into this whole Saphire Comet thing, the train went from Belgium to Auschwitz. So you start researching Belgium, which I've never done much of. You can't get far in researching Belgium without learning about these lines, these escape lines. And it was so amazing. It wasn't just Comet. There was one called Dutch Paris. There were multiple lines. They focused on different types of escapees. But what was so amazing was the participation of the local Belgian population. Because if you're going to have an escape line, you don't just need these brave young people. You need safe houses. You need drop boxes. You need people to forge documents. You need money. You need food. All these things. And there's all these local families like just doing this resistance work, which is incredible. Because if you think about it, when things go bad with an escape line, the young partisans, they can escape into the woods. But if you're there with your family and your business, you are really quite in jeopardy. And so I was immediately struck by the heroism of the local Belgian people in supporting the lines like Micheline ran.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Candy, yep.
Yeah, I have not finished the book yet. I certainly will in the next couple of days. I'm a little more than halfway through. And I'm really fascinated by the role of Lily after Hannah stole her identification card, and how she is then taken to the camp and her family is taken to the camp, and the strength she does not come across initially as this very strong woman. She's a nurse, but she stays home with her child and is very wrapped up in his minor issues, it seems. But she gets to this camp, and her husband and her child show up, and she shows the most incredible strength. And she knows she doesn't belong there. She knows that her ID was stolen, and she's not, doesn't even seem really angry about it. And I'm just wondering how you evolved that character.
Well, it's always fun to take these characters and see their growth arc, you know, when they're thrown into these other circumstances, right? But what's interesting is where Lily starts. So she starts the Germans didn't come into Belgium. They didn't barrel in like they did to Poland. They kind of came in with this notion of what they called the good occupier. It was a lie. And it was like, you follow along and we're not going to make it so bad if you're a native Belgian citizen. And Lily was completely buying into this. And that's why she was being quiet. And it's kind of through this realization that being quiet won't keep you safe, right? That's the whole point. And isn't that what we've all seen? Because I've told you that I was back in the day a big chicken, right? And I'm not brave. But we all know right now that being quiet will not keep us safe. And so it's seeing this evolution in Lily's character into finding her voice and finding her strength at the same time. Because, you know, when you have a child, I think your first instinct is like, you know, protect, like keep your head low. And then she sees that that's not going to protect her child either. And so I think that's where the strength really came from.
Thank you. Do we have any? Yep, Joan Churchill.
So why do you call Lily native Belgian when she wasn't born there?
Because she's a Belgian citizen. She has her citizenship. She's not native born, right? So probably native. Belgian citizen's probably the better word. So
no, you don't call a person native. Native means where the person was born.
I'm agreeing with you.
Citizenship is a different concept.
Right. I'm agreeing with you that when I say the native Belgian citizens, not Lily, right? Lily's acquired Belgian citizenship, but they went in.
Naturalized. Okay.
She's naturalized. That would be accurate. Correct. I'm agreeing with you.
All right. She was very young when she got there.
Right. In her mind, she's Belgian, right? She got there as a child where it's the life she's known. She's married there. In her life, she is, and she conveniently kind of relies on the distinction between Belgian citizens and non-citizens, which is a distinction that the Germans used early on before deciding that nobody was going to be, you know, that they were all going to be in trouble.
I'm reading another book, which we're going to do with the Besters in a few days about the occupation of France. And there were lots
of Jewish Marshall Plan.
Yeah. And there were lots of Jews in France who had come from another country. And my understanding is that unless you were born in France, you didn't have the status of being considered native French, that you were still considered to be from another country, even if you had citizenship.
Sort of like being living in Washington, D.C. If you weren't born here, I'm never going to be native.
Oh, okay.
Two of my kids were born in D.C. and raised here, and one of them was 10 months old when she arrived, but, you know, never native.
Well, there's a very sad story about the commando. I was just in Paris this past week, came back day before yesterday, and so I went to the Commando Museum, which I'd been to before, but it's just so sad. The family was actually about third generation in France, and yet they were considered foreign. And it's yeah.
Well, and we certainly hear echoes of that in lots of places right now in this country, in not just treatment of immigrants, but even people who might be of different, whether religion or race or other background that have been here for generations. And you know, I have, like, what initially came to mind, and we're all familiar with it. Rabbi Schmalkin was in Charlottesville during the Unite the Right marches and all of that, and when we heard Jews will not replace us. And the sort of question of how we, you know, Pam said before, it's having the courage to stand up not only when it's about us, but also when it's about others, to be able to recognize, and we all are familiar with the Pastor Niemöller. First they came for the trade unionists, et cetera, et cetera. I know I don't have it in the, that's not the right first line, but the reality is that if we allow one group to be persecuted, it's not just about that one group. And eventually it comes around to include not just us as Jews, but everyone. And also it's about being those models in how to do that courageous work, which it takes community, because I'm with Pam. There are things that are just really frightening and scary in this world, and we can't stand up to them alone. We can certainly raise our voices, but we are stronger when we stand up together. And I had the opportunity last night to be at the National Cathedral, where we heard Mona Golubeck, who I know many of you, again, some of you, we talked about this earlier, but Mona Golubeck, who wrote The Pianist of Williston Lane, and told her mother's story, and is continuing to tell that story around the world, and teaching it to the next generations, so that that there is that shared language, and also the reminder, certainly, of what we can do when we are in community, when we're supporting one another. And followed that up today by sitting with the very Reverend Randy Hollerith, who's the dean of the cathedral, who talked to me about this continued relationship Washington Hebrew has with the National Cathedral, and that they are there for us in this difficult and challenging time. And we're just as we've been there with them at different moments. And I think, again, it's about building community, and we each start in our little corner with our neighbors, with people we might not know, but we have that ability and that opportunity. Sorry, Pam, that I give long answers, and this is
I'm just entranced listening to you. I am just entranced.
But it's just so important, and more important now than ever, for us to be able to do that, and for us to have that courage. And we don't always know. I mean, Hannah, in the book, Hannah had lost already, really had lost everything, and I think that to me, that's part of what gave her that extra strength or courage to be able to move forward. But for Lily, I love that question about Lily, because what happens when you are somebody who she was very content and happy in her little life, and protected, and when the world comes knocking at the door, we need to already have that awareness, and be ready to act, and to act together.
Thank you.
Yeah. Pam, such a treat always. I want to see if we have any remaining questions. Ellen, please.
Question, but a comment. I thoroughly loved this book. I could have sat, and I read it quickly, and I could have sat down and read it a second time, all the way through again, and picked up pieces that I didn't find the first time. And I will do that this summer when I have time to concentrate on it. But I thought it was a fabulous book. And I do read a lot of historical fiction around World War II. So I just think that this is one outstanding piece of literature.
Thank you so much. That means the world. I will remember that when I get up at 4 a.m. to work on those revisions tomorrow. I appreciate it.
It's not my finest.
Reminds me why I'm doing it. Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, I really, I will say, I think I've read, hopefully the dog, can you hear the dog? Oh, okay.
I'm waiting for mine to bark at yours.
Okay. They'll start talking to each other. I've read about half of Pam's books, and so when I see one of Pam's books is on the Jewish Book Council list, and then they send us these boxes of books, and there are hundreds of books in there, but I always start by taking out a few that look the most interesting to me, and Pam's is always pretty much the first one that I read. So I read it early in the summer, probably I want to say, Bonnie, it's before we even go to the conference. And then reread as we get closer to when we're actually having this opportunity. And each time they're so rich and such depth of both characters and you know, the setting, that it really makes it such a joy and a pleasure to read. And I know I look forward to, you know, continuing my quest, and it will continue. We can have an agreement. I'll keep reading if you keep writing.
I'll keep writing. I consider myself the Jewish Book Council's Borscht Belt performer because I feel longer than anyone else, and I just keep it. But I miss when those 2-minute pitches were in person, and I got to hug all my old friends in New York. Yeah. That was amazing. But yes, I will be back, and I will keep writing. Each of you are more than welcome to find me online wherever you're hanging out, like your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, email. I really don't talk much about anything except books and my dog Scoop, who's over there. And so I hope you'll find me, and so we can continue talking until we can do this again.
Well, I'm so amazed. I couldn't put the book down. I think I read it in 2 days.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I was wondering about just how you figured out, when did you decide how the book was going to end? And I kind of wonder about the device of you having these two main characters being first cousins.
Well, I knew there were going to be the two characters. I actually didn't know if they were going to be cousins or sisters. And then the third woman came in. But this is the thing about being a pantser, right? So I don't know when things come in my brain because it all happens at the same time. So I usually have an opening scene. I usually know like how the end is going to happen, but maybe not who. Like not always who's going to wind up where. And then there's like this big middle you have to get through. So it's really, really hard to say. It all kind of, it's like a dream. It's like trying to put a dream in order, you know? I can't really do it. Plus it's a couple of years ago at this point. But that is what I know about, that I can remember about it. Is that okay? Yes. So I'm actually, when I leave you, I'm about to go do Hebrew high pickups. So I'm headed over to my shul, which is close by. But I thank you so much for having me. Colamy. It used to be called Temple Emmanuel. I'm in Cherry Hill.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Is that where Rabbi David was?
Yes.
Yes. And Rabbi Jerry Newberg.
Yep, who is now on the
Mainline. She's a good friend of mine.
Oh yeah, I go to Mainline a lot.
I know Ben David well. Yeah.
Rabbi David just had his 50th anniversary, I think, on the Bima this weekend. Yeah. So yes.
I saw that. I was there at the CCAR convention in March when he received his honorary doctorate at 50 years, which was really, really special.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I'm gonna turn it over to Bonnie.
Okay. I just wanted to thank Pam again and again and again. We just love having you here. I mean, every book, I agree with everybody else. I can't put them down. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
And of course, thank Rabbi Sue for all you do. Mara and I always appreciate, as does everybody else, you're leading these literary discussions with everyone, and I get time and time again. So thank you both. And thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to another season.
Always a pleasure. And Pam, have fun at Hebrew School.
Have a good Passover, everybody.
Happy Passover.
All right.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye. Good night. Thank you.
Bye.